Puzzled? Well, I was, but I'm literally dying to show you what this is all about. This is a die cutting machine, and basically you put cutters in between those plates on top of your artwork, paper or card, and then just wind it through and it cuts them out just like a cake cutter would. This handle winds two rollers which are cogged together, and a bit like an old style mangle pulls the whole thing through. Now you can work on different thicknesses, so this is a very carefully engineered baseboard allowing different thicknesses for different uses, embossing folders or for just die cutting. And this is the cutting plate itself, so the cutter bites down into that, and this is the pressure plate. So you put your base plate on and then the cutter plate, and then these are the dies. Now they're made out of metal and they're very carefully engineered. They have a pressure edge, so it's a sort of a flat edge that the pressure plate goes on, and they have a cutting edge. Those little holes there are to allow pressing or poking out of the die cut itself. So whatever the die cutter has cut out, you can use that little tool to push through those little holes that you can see there. Very carefully engineered. And there are hundreds of thousands of these in different designs all over the world. Now I'm going to show you the basics just by using a bit of black card, just to show you quickly. So this is the cutting plate, and I'm putting the card straight on that, the die cutter with the cutting edge down obviously, and then the pressure plate or the cover plate goes on top and you wind it through. And there's a handle on top to hold, because sometimes you have to turn, it's quite hard to wind it through because you're putting an immense amount of pressure on this thing to cut down through the card. Take off the pressure plate at the top, the cover plate, and you can see straight away that the die has cut its own shape perfectly. And now I've just got to poke that out. So take my pin tool, poke that out, and it's going to reveal a clone of itself. So we've got an aperture and we've got a cutout. And in a very simple way, they can be mounted to create all sorts of wonderful effects, and this is marvellous for encaustic art. Just using the cutout as an aperture, you can see that by moving it around you can create different colours behind. Or you could use the actual die cutout itself instead of using a rubber stamp as a silhouette. Just move it around to where you like it and stick it on. It also gives texture. And in the crafting hobby art world, this is a great tool to have. Again, just take an abstract and put a die cut over it so that you've got the aperture effect. And it creates something quite rich, quite strong. And you can see that as you move with brighter colours behind, then they're the ones that show up best. The darker colours get a bit lost here against the black, but they'd be great against white. Whereas against the black, the brighter, lighter colours show up best. So let's get into some encaustic work. So I'm going to create a background abstract card, put on the colours, and then wipe it onto the card. It's very quick and simple. If you haven't done encaustic before, anybody can do this. When you put the iron down and lift, you create these suctional effects. If you don't like those edge marks from the iron, just lift the card whilst you do the dabbing, and that helps to get rid of them. So it's cooled down already, and we can use it in the die cutting machine straight away. So cutting plate at the bottom, artwork on top, wax face up, and then I'm putting my die, the cutter itself, at one end so we can see the simplest way of using this. Remember, when you wind it through, you have to hold the machine quite firmly because there's a lot of pressure going on, especially when you use the die across like I have. Take it off, and you can see one of the problems of wax is that it gets onto the plates, but it's not actually a problem because all you've got to do is just take a piece of tissue and you can wipe it off. So just get your piece of tissue and rub it off. It's just like a little bit of wax on a piece of glass. It's really not a problem. Make sure that you're rubbing the right side, because if you rub the wrong side, then you can rub all day and nothing will happen. So make sure you turn it over and have the wax facing up, and then rub it off and it's clean. So it's not actually a problem. And then you can see how the die has cut out perfectly in the encaustic, nice clean cut. Take my little pin tool and just push it out from the actual die, so we've got the cut out piece itself. I probably should have put my glasses on to do this bit, but anyway. And I'm being very careful at the bottom here to make sure I press it all out, because some of this is very skinny, very thin, and I don't want to rip it. So there's my perfect cutout. One of the things that you might notice is some dirt in the die there, some wax has got in there. I'm going to show you how to clean that out so simply in just a minute. But first of all, let's just look at the artwork and see the result. You know, that's 2 minutes work. This is a slicing machine, a paper cutter, and I'm just going to chop the artwork into pieces now. This is another way of presenting it. And it makes it look a little bit more arty, I think, if you can actually panel it like this. Of course, you could arrange the pieces in any manner that you like. But now we've got the cutout, the aperture, and the original artwork. I prefer to use spray glue if I'm going to stick them down, because putting glue on the back of those little die pieces is quite difficult. Once the spray glue's on, of course, it's covering the whole of the surface of the back of the artwork, and then you just have to be careful as you place it, keeping the gaps that you want. You can always trim the outside again at the end if you prefer. It sticks to your fingers a bit with spray glue on the back, so be careful. And then I'm just tapping it down. Now, I could have sealed all of that artwork before I started, but we'll look at that again in the next one probably. So this is the finished result. Aperture, cutout, original artwork. Now back to that die that's got the wax in it. The way to get rid of this wax is a simple thing. Just take the iron into the mini hot plate mode, put some tissue on top and dab at it, and the wax melts and comes off on the tissue. So straight away you can get all of that dirt out and the die is nice and clean again. So it's as easy as that. So let's take a look at a sky and a landscape. The sky is white for the light, and then yellow, pink, blue, just wiped along the card. And then for the landscape part itself, some darker, stronger colours. The top edge that's closest to us as we look is going to be where the horizon will be, so that'll be at the top of the arm when it's turned over. And I'm putting in some brighter colour towards the bottom in the hope that we'll see that. And then, as you can see, that rounded edge of the iron is forming the horizon shapes, backwards and forwards, to create our little landscape for this die cut experiment. Bending the card, lifting and bending it, so that top edge of the iron doesn't touch, and then we don't get all the arc marks. But because it's gone a little bit dark now, I'm going to put in some brighter, stronger colour, and hopefully that'll lift up the foreground and make it a little bit more interesting when we do our die cut and present the artwork at the end. You can see already how that just picks it up, and you can do this with encaustic at any point in time, as you may already know. So that's our landscape. Keep it as simple as that. Now it's on the die cutting machine ready, but this time I'm going to use some clear material over the top of it. Now you could use anything, but I'm using transparent polypropylene. It's one of those bags that you get cards in. We all have lots of this. You could use cling film, you could use plastic, you could use a bit of paper if you want. Anything, and all I'm doing this for is to put over the card and over the wax and then put the die on top. And by doing this, you protect the die, the inner part of the die, from the actual wax itself, so it doesn't get dirtied by the wax as we saw before. So you've got these layers in the sandwich, and then you put it into your machine and get cranking the handle. Remember to hold the machine firmly, because there's a lot of pressure going on, especially as you put the die through when it's across the machine like I've got it. Take the top pressure plate off, take off my protective polypropylene. You can see that the die came out with it, but inside the die it's perfectly clean. It's still cut through the card perfectly as well. So take out my piece, and then I've got the cutout and I've got the aperture. If I put that onto a black card, you can see how effective it is, how simple it is. That's a landscape with one die cut in it. I can just put the cutout onto a piece of black card, and that by itself can be very effective. So let's have a look at some different examples. Here's one with 3 different dies all cut out in one go and stuck beside onto black card. Panels with die cuts cut out, overlaid on a landscape. Those pieces that were cut out put onto a piece of black wax. Here's just an abstract with a cutout mounted beside it. A sort of wacky landscape with 3 cutouts mounted on white card, and those cutouts mounted here onto white card with some dragonflies. The simplest one is just to chop some shapes out and put them onto black card. Here's the same thing but a bit more sophisticated, and I've put the chop out next to the bit of landscape. Here I've used the chop outs to the dies to extend the landscape. Here again I've used the colouring from the landscape to make the die cut out. This is on the underpaper, which I folded and then cut out, and those cutout folds I stuck onto a piece of black card, but I made a mistake and one's got a bit ripped. And then these are similar to the ones that we've already done. You can see I've put silver around the edges, and they're just arranged in different forms for you to see some of the possibilities. I mean, there's so much that we can do, and in the next video I'm going to show you more. Back to what we sort of started with ourselves, with a little bit more developed landscape aspect. This is the one we did in the video today, the first one. And the landscape with the cutout. This is the introduction to basic die cutting with encaustic. I'll be making more videos, stay tuned.